In every corner of the world, there are stories waiting to be told, tales of courage, mystery, and magic. Here, every whisper becomes a legend, and every legend comes alive. Welcome to the realm where imagination has no end. Welcome to your world of tales. The world is wild. A landscape of endless, rolling, flat prairie and plateaus, unbroken by any major river or canyon. The air is thick with a primal stillness, the silence of a land waiting to be shaped. A wind, massive and deep, whistles across the plains. From the east, a silhouette appears on the horizon. It grows rapidly, dwarfing the scattered, giant ponderosa pine trees. This is Paul Bunyan, ageless, immense, with eyes the color of a mountain lake. He is so tall that he must bend at the waist to look at a regular-sized tree. He wears a heavy flannel shirt, suspenders made from mooring rope, and boots that could flatten a small cabin. He carries a colossal, gleaming axe over his shoulder, the blade wider than a stagecoach. Walking just behind him, easily keeping pace, is Babe, the blue ox. Babe is a deep, impossible cobalt blue, the color of a winter midnight sky. He is even bigger than Paul, his horns like twin lightning rods, and his breath clouds are so cold they leave frost on the ground in July. Paul stops. He removes a pipe from his pocket. It's a massive, repurposed ship's chimney, and lights it by striking the axe blade against a granite boulder, voice like the grinding of glaciers. "Well, Babe, look at this land." Babe moans, a sound that vibrates the very air. Flat. Flat as a pancake left out in the rain. Where's the character? Where's the challenge? He gestures with his pipe toward the setting sun, where the land stretches into an infinite, monotonous horizon. I've been clearing trees for so long, I'm starting to feel like a beaver with a complex. I need a project. He taps his axe handle thoughtfully on the ground, creating a small earthquake that travels for miles. We need to give this country some drainage. A path for the waters. The snowmelt from the Rockies, she just pools up here, turns the whole center of the continent into a soggy boot heel. We need a way to let her run down to the sea. Babe dips his massive head, sniffing the dry, cracked earth. He lets out a puff of ice-cold air that instantly freezes a small patch of desert scrub. Exactly, old friend. We're not just making a ditch. We're carving a path for the ages. A place where the sun can shine on the layers of time. A monument to good, clean work. Paul lifts his axe high above his head. The steel catches the sun, throwing a blinding glare across the plains. Paul Bunyan is a speck of humanity against the towering scale of the empty continent. The axe glitters. The earth's been waiting on us, Babe. Let's give her a reason to look down. With a tremendous, ground-shaking grunt, Paul brings the axe down. Hump! The sound is deafening, a sonic boom mixed with the tearing of rock. The sheer force of the blow splits the ground open. A jagged, smoking crack shoots out across the plateau. A family of regular-sized beavers, no bigger than large dogs, who have been happily damming up a small stream, immediately stop their work. High-pitched, worried chatter. Did you feel that? Eyes wide. The giant is back at it. He's always messing with the good flow. Quick! Get the family. If he starts a river, our dam will be down to the sea by lunchtime. The beavers scurry away frantically. Paul pulls his axe from the earth. The crack he made is already a small, smoky gulch, 50 feet deep. He wipes a bead of sweat the size of a pumpkin from his brow. That's the old mean cut, Babe. The appetizer. Now for the meal. He hands the axe handle to Babe. Babe carefully takes the handle in his mouth, the steel blade resting between his massive horns. Good boy. We'll start in a straight line, let the first waters run, then we can put a nice curve on her. Paul starts walking west, setting a determined, long stride. Babe follows, dragging the immense axe blade behind him. The grinding, scraping sound of the steel blade being dragged across the bedrock and through the dirt is loud, continuous, and horrifyingly industrial. It is the sound of the earth being filed open. The ground opens like a plowed field, only instead of soft soil, it's hard, packed stone, revealing layers of colored strata underneath. Paul and Babe work for days, driving a deep, straight channel across the plateau. The sheer physical effort required, the heat of the sun, and the dust storm created by their labor. They encounter a massive, diamond-hard vein of rock, a giant granite plug that resists the axe. Paul must use his superhuman ingenuity, perhaps harnessing a geyser or a small volcano, to soften the stone for Babe's final, explosive pull. The newly carved ditch starts to fill with the ancient, pooled-up water from the mountains. This running water attracts the first wildlife and small communities, who begin to view the growing chasm with awe and terror. The water flow becomes too much, turning the channel into a raging, uncontrollable flood. This requires Paul to shape the edges of the growing canyon and use the dirt/mud he's excavated, the material that will later become the walls and surrounding plains, to build retaining banks. Paul realizes the straight path is too fast and too violent. He needs to slow the water and manage the flow. He decides to give the canyon its famous, massive, serpentine curve. The climax of the carving, where Paul takes the axe back and, with a single, legendary pivot of his body, swings the axe blade sideways along the channel. This action carves the enormous bend and widens the gorge into the Grand Canyon we know today. Miles wide, a mile deep, with the Colorado River, the former ditch, flowing through its depths. A regular-sized, skeptical geologist, or an ancient Native American storyteller, arrives to question Paul about the scar he's left on the earth. Paul explains his philosophy. The earth needed dramatization, not just function. Paul and Babe prepare to move on to their next impossible task, leaving the canyon as their enduring legacy. Paul and Babe are traveling east, crossing what is now the vast, flat expanse of the American Midwest. The land is still wild, but thanks to their passage, it is remarkably level. Paul uses the flat of his enormous shovel, a steam-powered dredge bucket fitted to a handle, to occasionally smooth out a particularly stubborn hill. He is creating the perfect, even surface for future farms and travel. Wiping his brow. There. No one likes bumpy travel, Babe. We're leaving this place smoother than a freshly planed board. Now to the north. I hear the waters are getting unruly. The scene is messy. The area is a confusion of forests, glacial debris, and hundreds of small, shallow, mucky ponds. This is the Proto-Great Lakes region. Look at this blue. An absolute swamp. All the good water from the Rockies and the Grand Canyon runoff is pooling here, but it's spread too thin. Too many puddles, not enough lakes. He surveys the area, his head tilting thoughtfully. We need 5 massive, deep, beautiful bowls. Big enough to hold a good amount of the world's freshwater, and still leave room for a few good ice fishing trips. Paul throws down his axe, and picks up the shovel. And no need for sharp cuts here, Babe. This is a job for the scoop. He begins to dig. His movements are like those of a massive child playing in a sandbox, but the results are world-altering. He drives the colossal shovel deep into the earth, scoops out a volume of dirt that would make a mountain, and deposits it far to the south, creating the Appalachian foothills and the Ohio Valley. A rhythmic, deep schlorp, followed by a distant, ground-shaking thud. One by one, Paul digs the 5 Great Basins: Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. The excavated holes are immediately enormous, deep, and empty. There. 5 proper holding tanks. Now for the water. The clouds are a long way off. We need volume, and we need it now to test the drainage. Paul looks around frantically. He needs a creative, instant source for filling what are essentially 5 inland seas. Think. Where's the fastest source of water that's already got some zip to it? Babe moves enthusiastically, pointing a horn toward Paul's camp, which is miles away. Paul squints. The camp? What's at the camp, babe? The big coffee pot? No, that's steam. The pancake syrup barrel. Paul had brought a massive, repurposed oil drum, miles high, filled with his favorite, super thick, blue-tinged blueberry pancake syrup, prepared for his morning stack. Oh, the missus is gonna skin me for this. But we need a test fluid, and syrup's thick enough to show the swirls and eddies. Paul sprints to his camp. He returns, struggling, rolling the enormous, leaky syrup barrel. It's the size of a modern skyscraper laid on its side. Heave! Ho! With an immense effort, he tips the barrel. The syrup, a viscous, thick, shimmering blue liquid, begins to pour out, a massive, slow-motion waterfall. The blue syrup flows into the first lake basin, Lake Superior. It is a spectacular, messy flood. There's the depth. Good and deep. Babe, smelling his favorite food, can't resist. He leans down and tries to take a sip, but the sheer volume of the flow is too strong. He gets his massive blue muzzle and horns coated in sticky blue syrup. He shakes his head, flinging syrup everywhere. This syrup spray accidentally directs the flow toward the next 4 lakes, connecting them all with sticky, syrupy channels. Babe, don't shake it. Now it's everywhere. Look at the color. The Great Lakes now contain a vast, shallow base layer of bright, sticky, blue-tinted liquid. Well, it's a mess. But it's a defined mess. The structural integrity is sound. We'll just have to wait for the rain to wash the blue out. Might take a few hundred years, but she'll run clear eventually. Paul looks down at the largest puddle of syrup, running his finger through it. Still looks tasty, though. Think anyone will mind if I dip a small mountain peak in here? He pulls a small, distant hill from the ground, brings it over, and dips it like a biscuit into the blue expanse, taking a massive, syrupy bite. Good work, babe. Good work. Now to the North Woods. I'm craving some clean, icy cold. Paul and Babe head to the deep Northwoods to rest. The immense cold is comforting to Babe, but Paul needs to make a massive fire to keep warm. Paul decides to clear the densest, most difficult forest in the north to create a clean, usable logging camp. He fells so many trees that the resulting pile of logs becomes a new, large mountain range, the Adirondacks or Cascades. Paul's exhaustion leads him to create a massive stove and ask Babe to gather the necessary ingredients for a colossal meal, highlighting the impossible scale of his cooking. Paul realizes the trees he's felled are causing a huge environmental problem. The lack of shade is raising the temperature of the nearby river, the Proto-St. Lawrence, threatening the native fish. The cold is absolute. It is the kind of cold that cracks wood and freezes sound. The air shimmers with a million ice crystals. Paul Bunyan is huddled next to a colossal fire. The flames are enormous, licking hundreds of feet into the sky. The heat generated by this fire is so intense it keeps a 5-mile radius completely snow-free. The fire pit itself is a repurposed meteorite crater. Babe, the blue ox, is perfectly comfortable, his blue coat frosted with rime. He is using his icy breath to keep Paul's giant pot of coffee from getting too hot, shivering despite the immense fire. That's the stuff, babe. That's the cold I crave after that sticky syrup business. But I can't rest easy with all this mess around. Paul gestures into the gloom of the surrounding forest. It is a terrifyingly dense, ancient stand of trees, impassable and dark. Look at those trees. Packed in tighter than sardines in a can. We need a proper clearing. Room for a man to breathe, and room for a proper log pile to season. He stands up, stretching his limbs. The movement causes the snow to fly in a small, localized blizzard. We're going to fell this entire sector, babe. Every single stick. And we'll stack the logs so high they touch the clouds. Sound. Paul picks up his axe. The blade, warmed by the fire, hisses as it meets the cold air. Paul picks up his axe. The blade, warmed by the fire, hisses as it meets the cold air. Paul takes the first swing. The sound is not a chop, but a massive, sustained crack. The blow is so powerful it fells 1,000 trees instantly. Paul uses Babe to drag the felled trees. Babe stacks the logs, one on top of the other, with impossible precision. The pile grows quickly, rising higher and higher, dwarfing the surrounding forests. The log pile becomes a new, rugged, forested mountain range, the Adirondacks or Cascades. Paul stands on the summit of the new log mountain, looking proud. The forest is gone. The land is wide open, flat, and ready for farming. Paul is utterly exhausted. He has cleared the entire forest. He wipes his brow with a giant flannel sleeve. Well, that'll do. Now, a man needs sustenance after a job like that. Paul unveils his cooking apparatus. A stove made from a whole steam locomotive, a frying pan made from the roof of a large barn, and a mixing bowl made from a hollowed-out boulder. Babe, my belly's rumbling louder than a mountain in spring. I need a breakfast that'll stick to a man's ribs through the next ice age. Go gather me the supplies. I need 600 pounds of flour for the dough, 2 barrels of fresh milk, and all the eggs in the county. Babe moans happily. He knows this task. He races off. A new problem. Paul begins mixing the flour and milk with a giant tree branch, stirring the mixture vigorously in the boulder bowl. As he works, he notices a large, steaming river flowing nearby, the Proto-St. Lawrence River. It is running strangely fast, and is giving off visible steam. That river looks nervous. Why is she steaming like that in the dead of winter? Paul walks to the riverbank. He dips his finger into the water. It is almost hot. Thunder and lightning. The water's too warm. He realizes the mistake. By clearing the entire forest, he removed the deep shade that kept the river water cool and stable year-round. The winter sun, though low, is now heating the exposed water. The fish, the cold water trout and salmon, they'll boil. My work is causing a heat wave in the water. Paul frantically looks around the now bare landscape. The log pile is too far away. He has no shade trees left. He looks at the river, which is rapidly heating up. He needs to cool it down instantly. Think, Paul. Think. How do you cool 1,000 miles of water in a minute? Paul looks at Babe, who is returning, pulling a massive cart piled high with food supplies. He is so focused on the task, he's barely paying attention. Babe, stop. Forget the eggs. We need ice. And not just a little. Paul rushes over to Babe, grabbing the massive, frozen block of blue ice that Babe's breath always leaves on the northern side of his harness. We've got to use your breath, old friend. We've got to turn this river into a refrigerated trough. Paul grabs Babe by the horns and points his massive snout down the riverbank. Blow, blue. Blow the deep, cold winter right into that water. Babe understands the urgency. He takes a massive, deep breath, expanding his immense chest. Whoosh. Babe unleashes a terrifying, continuous blast of super cold, Arctic air down the length of the steaming river. The air is so cold it instantly freezes the surface of the river into a thin, long sheet of ice. The water temperature drops instantly. The steam disappears. The river is saved. Panting. Thank you, Babe. That was a close one. From now on, when I clear a forest, I'm leaving a nice, thick border of trees along the riverbanks. Gotta keep that trout happy. He scratches Babe behind the horns. Now, how about we get back to those 600 pounds of breakfast? Paul realizes the entire continent is still slightly tilted, causing water to drain mostly to the east. He needs a central spine to ensure some water flows west to the Pacific and to keep the two ocean drainage systems separate. Paul decides to create the Continental Divide, or the Rockies' final shape, by digging a massive line across the spine of the continent. He uses the axe in a new way, less as a plow and more as a chisel and wedge. The sheer act of carving this spine causes significant seismic activity, the creation of the first major earthquake zones. This requires Paul to stabilize the new mountains. Paul needs a unique tool to pack the earth tight and stabilize the divide. He uses a giant, frozen whale from the Northern Ocean, swinging it like a massive tamper. Paul and Babe are standing on a slightly elevated plain, surveying the vast North American continent. The Grand Canyon now flows majestically to the Gulf. The Great Lakes shimmer with clear, fresh water, the syrup having long since drained or evaporated, and the cleared northwoods are sprouting new growth, with respectful tree-lined rivers. But Paul frowns. He notices something amiss. She's still a bit lopsided, Babe. See how all the big rivers, the good ones, they still mostly run east, towards the Atlantic, or down to the Gulf. Babe moans, indicating agreement. His massive head tilts. The Pacific, she's feeling left out. And if we don't put a proper backbone in this country, all the water's just gonna keep sloshing to one side. We need a proper divide. Something to separate the flows, send some west, some east. A true spine for the land. The Rockies. He finishes, exhausted but satisfied. He gently places the now partially melted whale back down, a massive, permanent fixture in a valley, eventually forming a series of unique, whale-shaped lakes. There, the Great Divide. Water flows east, water flows west. Balance has been achieved. The continent has its backbone. Paul looks out over the vast, now beautifully shaped land. From the canyon to the lakes, the clearings to the mountains, his work is finally done. What a world, Babe. What a world we made. Babe MOS, a sound of deep contentment. He nudges Paul with his great blue head. Paul smiles, scratches Babe behind the ears. I reckon this land is ready for folks now. For settlers and dreamers. She's got her wild spots, her peaceful spots, and her grand spots. Just as it should be. This is just one epic journey from the legends of Paul Bunyan. What other stories are waiting to be told? Do you have another tall tale, a historical event, or a futuristic vision that needs an equally grand narrative? Tell me your next idea, and let's craft another legend together.